akan Japan jala kapag akaldaya laligabit anamaka magaha hadaha anati parmati Johnny Harmony Narake Narange Narupe Narike Akarmanga Paramanga Kanje Aleke Ate Hale Abe Abe Abu Haju Anasakas Akan Japan Jalagapa Akalaya Lalegabe Anamaka Magaha Hadaha Anate Parmate Johnny Harmony Narake Narange Narupe Narike Akarmanga Paramanga Kante Aleke
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. This is Fatma. I am the head of community at ThinkHuman, and I'm calling in from Tunisia. First, before we start even the conversation, let us know your name and where you're dialing in from. We would love to hear from you. And you could do that in the chat. Hello from Chicago, from Portland, Denver, Massachusetts, Brooklyn, Costa Rica, Ohio, Denver, Colorado, Indianapolis, Washington. Oh my goodness, so great to have all of you. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, and we will be talking about mental health and creating a culture of support inside of your organizations. So as you're getting settled, we would love to get the conversation started. One of the ways we'll be interacting is by using the Zoom feature. If you're looking for it, just hover over your Zoom window and find it in the lower right. The conversation will get richer the more you get involved, and sometimes the most vulnerable shares actually happen in the chat. So we encourage you to share your thoughts, comments, suggestions, and questions there. So to kick things off, we would love to hear why you showed up here today. As a former mental health professional, this is such an important topic for me. We see organizations tiptoe around this conversation, and what we're aiming to address today is the stigma around mental health, so people feel empowered creating change within their organizations if you are an HR leader, or simply feel empowered to speak up about it with your manager or with your teammates. So for anyone who's willing to share, jump in the chat and let us know, what do you want to change in your organizational culture and mental health today? Let me see a few shares. Oh, people are still sharing their names. This is awesome. People seem to be doing well, and we want to support people with their struggles. I want it to be okay to say that I'm not okay, to be able to make it comfortable, to talk about it. Yes, amazing. Want to normalize talking about it. That's exactly the kind of conversations we want to have today. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our partners. I want to quickly introduce them, as well as ThinkHuman. Sapling automates your people workflow for onboarding to offboarding and everything in between by connecting your people data across your existing systems. BlueBoard is the world's leading experiential reward and recognition platform. We partner with companies to celebrate their teams with rewards that bring fulfillment outside of work, from watercolor painting classes to learning to surf to chasing northern lights. There is an experience for everyone. I love that. ThinkHuman unleashes the soul in business by equipping people leaders with the skills they need to lead effectively, compassionately, and inclusively. We do this work through cohort-based leadership journeys focused on increasing emotional intelligence and creating space for true mindset shift and long-lasting behavioral change. We believe the work we do in L&D is more impactful when aligned and combined with DEI initiatives, and we're excited to speak to you about that. So we're actually gonna launch a poll And please let us know which partner you would like to hear from, which partner you would like to speak about and about their services, or feel free to maybe check all the boxes if you want to talk to everyone. I mean, I love the three companies. I definitely have a close relationship with BlueBoard, as I definitely am very excited to get them ThinkHuman and partner with them as well for our rewards and recognition programs. And please just let us know which partner would benefit you and your company at this time. Alrighty, so I'm gonna leave it for just a few more seconds. Thank you for letting us know your thoughts, and I'm gonna end the polling. Okay, so since we're speaking about mental health today, we actually have a mini surprise for all of you. Before I turn it over to our moderator, Hakimia, we want to make sure that we highlight the importance of connecting with ourselves. And for you today, we have a friend of mine also calling from Tunisia and a community member, Miriam Shibani. She is a mindfulness coach, a yoga instructor, leading us through few breathing techniques that you could use daily by yourself, with your teams, with your teammates, and with your family members. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Fatma. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here with all of you. I'm Miriam, calling from Tunisia. I'm very happy to be with you today. So I will be guiding you through some breathing techniques, like Fatma said. This can help you centrate yourself and clear your mind. So let's start, please, by maybe closing our eyes, if I may ask. We will start also by relaxing our shoulders. Make yourself comfortable. And we will try to focus now on our breath. Just try to focus on the breath, please. I have to remind you that we will be just using the nose. So the mouth does not make a part of our breathing system. So we will try to inhale deeply, bringing the air in, and exhale slowly. Again, try to focus on my voice, please. Relax your eyelids, relax your shoulder, relax your neck, and take a deep breath in. Take your time, and once again, inhale deeply by bringing your belly button out, and exhale by pulling it in. Again, when you are ready, inhale deeply, stay tall, and exhale slowly by bringing the belly button in. And now just try to keep your eyes closed and to focus on what's happening inside. There is maybe little changes on the inside. Just observe it. Now we will go into Kumbhaka. Kumbhaka, it's a retention. It's a breathing techniques. So we are going to keep the air in. I will ask you to inhale deeply, all together when you are ready. And then to bring your chin to your chest and to hold the air in. We're gonna hold it for 7 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Bring your chin up. Exhale slowly. Please go back to a natural breathing. Relax again your neck. Relax your shoulders. And again, go back to a simple, natural breathing. I will restart again. This time will be a little bit longer. So take your time. And when we are ready, we will restart again. We inhale deeply. We'll bring our chin to our chest and we'll try to lock the air in. Ekam, due, treni, shatvari, pancha, shat, sapta, ashtau, nava. Bring the chin up. Exhale. We try to go back again to natural breathing, always by observing what's happening inside. Without any judgment, just try to notice and to observe the changes happening inside. We'll restart for the last time. I will stay a little bit longer this time. All together. Inhale, please. Bring your chin to your chest again. Lock the air in. I will start the counting. Ekam, due, treni, shatvari, panch, shat, sapta, ashtau, nava, dasha, ekadasha, dvedasha. Bring your chin up. Exhale. Bring all the air out. And then again, go back to a natural breathing. And we are going to prepare our eyes and to come back slowly here and now. Take your time. And this is it. So thank you, everyone. Namaste. And I'm going to pass it to Hakima. It was a pleasure to be with all of you. I hope this experience was good for all of you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. That was awesome. Look, I'm getting namaste. Thank you. I needed that all in the chat. Lord knows I needed it. Hello, ThinkHuman family. How are you? ¿Cómo está? Welcome to this amazing webinar that we're about to have. We just got started off with Miriam and this breathing technique, which was absolutely needed. And I just want to say, prior to us starting, Miriam really said something that really connected with me. All of my prayers go out to people who are experiencing some challenges in this moment, specifically our brothers and sisters in the Middle East. 2021 has had some challenges. We've had challenges starting from 2020 to now. And my prayers are to us all. In fact, my own personal struggles led to me having to seek spiritual counseling.
Hakimia, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me? I'm talking this whole time.
We can hear you now.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Did it just go on mute automatically, or I never unmuted?
Yeah, it went on automatically, and
Okay.
I stopped hearing you after you sought spiritual counseling.
All right. Yes, I just wanted to share my own personal spat with, mental health and just be vulnerable and transparent with our family today on me and my struggles, me feeling lost at a certain point in my life and disconnected to my clients, my family, but most importantly, myself. And so amid these unprecedented times of uncertainty and devastation, the need for workforce mental health support is really top of mind for a lot of leaders, and these leaders here on our panel today. So they understand that there is an overwhelming need for support. They understand the struggles personally themselves with anxiety, depression, loneliness, and just concerns that exist with family members. In fact, I just want to share some research. 86% said that mental health became a high priority for their companies in 2020. 54% said that their employees now have higher expectations regarding mental health support in the workplace. And so with this new awareness, I'm hoping that we all come together to chart or create this new normalcy, as many of you said, normalizing this conversation. So today we will talk about some of the best approaches to fight this stigma, as well as how to address mental health in the workplace. And so let's meet our amazing panelists today. We have Vice President of People at Carew, Allison Tom, Head of People at BlueBoard, Shannon Ferguson, Director of DE&I at Headspace, Cornell Woodson, Kavita Fora, former Chief People Officer of Splice. And so with that being said, Shannon, I would love just to hear your perspective on how mental health is being addressed in your experience within your organization. And then what's your personal connection to this topic as well?
Absolutely, Hakimia. I'm so excited to be here today with my colleagues and to have this great conversation. I'll actually start with my personal connection to mental health, because I feel like that, professionally drives me quite a lot. So before I became an HR lady, I actually was a social worker, and the experiences that I had as a social worker, really contributing to my community, looking for solutions, and recognizing that people come into their lives and to lots of different situations carrying all kinds of weight. Everybody has so much going on, and you don't know what it's going to be until you sit down and have a conversation, and you start to understand that we're all complex beings and we're all just trying to sort of work through this world and do the things that we care about and believe in, and yet we've got a lot that we're juggling. So that social work training and that social work experience has really influenced me as an HR leader. And I always think about the idea that social workers work in communities, and HR leaders, work in companies, but it's essentially the same kind of thinking that I try to bring to both, which is that, individuals in the workplace have a lot of different experiences going on, and they're all part of different systems. And we have an obligation to understand that people are going through it in their own special and different ways inside the workplace, just as much as we do kind of like out in the larger world. So I bring that perspective to BlueBoard and really look for opportunities to open up mental health conversations at our company. And so that's, taking down barriers so that people feel comfortable speaking and sharing. It's also building programs so that we specifically recognize mental health as kind of a vector on overall employee well-being and ability to do great work. So I'll pass it over to somebody else on the panel from there to share their experience, but that's my story.
Don't all go at once. Thank you for sharing your story, Shannon.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think for me, this is deeply personal, right? I think managing and understanding my own mental health personally and going through the journey of unpacking my own stuff that sort of travels my baggage that comes with me, everywhere I go, and taking that personal journey myself, I think really grounds me in creating that same space for other people to be able to also unpack it for themselves as well, to really take away the stigma of what it means to talk about mental health, and particularly in the workplace, right? Because there's so often the stigma that like the workplace isn't the place to have those conversations, right? So that's a great place to have those conversations because we don't leave those things at the door. Right. When I come into this room, I'm at home, right? When I come into this room, I don't leave my stuff out there in the kitchen, right? That stuff comes with me everywhere that I am. And so creating space similar to our identities, right? Creating space for that is necessary for us to be able to be respected and honored and taken care of holistically, and not just the pieces that people deem as most important to do the job, which is my skill set, my knowledge, and things of that sort, but all the things that impact me as a human being, right? And that really holistic piece. And I think the other layer for me is really that diversity and inclusion aspect, right? And really double clicking into the ways in which women, particularly right now, and as we've lost so many women in the workforce, right? Due to our inability to really provide the support and the adequate attention and honor of their experiences for people of color, for trans people, queer people. How are we really double clicking and not providing a one size fits all model for how we support our employees, but really understanding the unique ways in which everyone shows up and how mental health impacts their life.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cornell.
I can jump in. Hi, everyone. Allison. I, as a people leader, I've always been really interested in making sure that, we really help our people to feel seen and heard and valued. And as it relates to mental health, if people, as Cornell said, if people don't feel comfortable bringing their whole selves and addressing all of the struggles, all of the things that they're dealing with, then you're innately not seeing them, right? You're not acknowledging their full selves. And so that is really, I think, the aim of my work. Not only how can we help people to tell their stories, their whole stories, but also how can we support them and help discover new parts of their stories. And part of that is being able to talk openly about these things. On a personal level, since we're sharing on a personal level, I've also done my own kind of personal exploration and have done a lot of reflection and kind of coming to the realization that oftentimes I have maybe masked, I've hidden behind a smile oftentimes, even when I was maybe dealing with anxiety or feeling overwhelmed, and never was that more true than in the last year, right? And certainly in recent months with the rise in violence against the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, I was confronted with my own identity and actually grappling with, how was that taking a toll on my mental health, and how was that taking a toll on how I was showing up in the workplace. And so that for me was a really important moment of clarity when I was able to, maybe for the first time in my professional career, to be truly vulnerable about how I was experiencing that and how powerful that experience was, and how liberating and how supported and transformational that was for me. And so just a perfect and timely reminder for us that these conversations are so important for everyone to be having.
Allison, you said so much that I would love to unpack, but I know we have Kavita, and I do want to shout out Adriana. She says, we have to be human at work so that we can be human everywhere else. Well said, Adriana. Go ahead, Kavita.
Yeah, so my personal connection to this, I think, was as the chief people officer of several hypergrowth startups, my focus was always on the employees. Of how do I create this great employee experience, including wellness programs, including spaces to talk about mental health and benefits for employees to feel that they had support. However, especially in the last year, I did not really focus on my own mental health. So as I started to feel burnout, I just kept suppressing that because I felt guilty. I saw so many of my friends and family that lost jobs, were struggling with health, physical health problems and other things, that I thought I should just, tap into my gratitude and feel grateful to have a job and not, just kind of deny that burnout feeling. And the more I kept suppressing it, I think the harder it got to ignore. So for me, I think it's that concept of putting your oxygen mask on first in order to help everyone else before putting it on everyone else, like on a plane. Because from a long-term sustainability perspective, like ignoring mental health challenges is just not sustainable.
Not at all. Oh, well said, all of you. And I want to thank you so much for leading with your vulnerability, because I believe that when you lead with vulnerability, you open up so many more doors to invite others in. As you pour out, you allow others to come and support you, to pour in. So with that being said, Allison, you really, connected with me pre-call, specifically when you talked about leading with discomfort with this conversation. So please elaborate a little bit further as it relates to, the reality is we're going to be uncomfortable. And
yes. Well, I can see in the chat that a lot of people, fortunately, are maybe already comfortable opening up, feeling vulnerable. But for many of you and many of us, I think that there is still a certain level of discomfort around conversations about mental health. And that can come from a number of things, right? Just not feeling informed or feeling educated about the topic. Maybe you don't feel that there's the psychological safety to be able to have these conversations. And I think I just want to encourage all of us to just start with that discomfort, sit in it a little bit, like let it sit, marinate in it a little bit, and let that be a starting point. Part of that discomfort is part of the growth that I think all of us can experience. And let that lead you to the questions that will help us open up the dialogue and hopefully just seek to understand a little bit more.
Does anyone have anything to have? I see a lot of hands. Look, Cornell, go ahead. You're ready.
I love that so much because after the storm came the sun, right? Like,
yes.
It's hard to go through the ugly and the messiness of interactions with other people and take, right? It's hard, right? And oftentimes what strays us away from supporting others, and particularly in the conversation around mental health, is that we haven't dealt with our own stuff yet, right? So it's bringing up stuff for me that I'm not ready to handle yet, right? So
repeat that,
right?
Come on.
Stay where you are, right? And I've been there, right, where I could not support other people because I'm like, whoa, no, because then I gotta unpack my own stuff and it's bringing up for me, and I'm not ready for that, right? But getting to that point where you lean into that discomfort, and my background is in higher education, and we talk about leaning into the discomfort all the time because that's where the growth. As a diversity professional, when I tell people who come into my workshops, if you leave here uncomfortable, I haven't quite done my job yet. Right? We haven't stretched you a bit to go, okay, this is different from what I've understood of how I've seen the world. And a part of that, a part of change and doing what's right is being uncomfortable. It's a part of the process. And so I love, Allison, that you brought that up around like lean into that discomfort, but what's the support system that is around us as we lead into that discomfort, right? It's not discomfort for discomfort's sake. Right? It's comfort mixed with the level of support to guide you through the journey of getting to the other side of that tunnel where we can all be in the light.
Yeah.
Yes, well said. So go ahead.
All right, I just wanted to add to that I think that oftentimes too, for a lot of folks in the conversation, if you're people leaders or your managers, you might feel some of that discomfort might be coming from feeling like you don't have the answer. And I think that Cornell's totally right that let's remove the pressure of feeling like you have to come into every conversation with all of the solutions to all of the questions. And hopefully that also makes you feel a bit more comfortable stepping into the conversation.
Perfectionism, it doesn't exist.
Right. And Shannon, you talk about that. A little bit, right?
Yeah, I just, I wanted to build on that. You saw me lean in.
I seen you literally pulled yourself in. So go ahead.
Yeah. For me, I think that there is so much struggle to like getting started with a mental health program or doing something in mental health at your organization, because you feel like you have to know all the answers. You feel like you have to have the single solution that hits all the boxes for everybody. But like, I am here to tell you, there is not one solution. There's not a single thing that you can do that is going to make a difference for every person. And so you've got to look for a way to like, sort of like lift that heavy burden that you're holding that says, I need to be a mind reader. I need to know the right answers. I need to have, the one solution, and start thinking, what is a solution? What does the person in front of me right now need? Where are they starting? And what can I offer today? And just take a single step forward on this. That is my like deepest advice. It's not deep at all, which is just start somewhere, like any move that you make in offering your team any kind of like mental health and wellness stuff, programs, conversations, you know, software, services, or resources, or anything like that, you know, it all starts with a single conversation, with making a single person feel heard, comfortable, welcome to be themselves. And so just take, you know, one step forward. You can do that without a ton of resources and support. And I just think it's so important to free yourself from that sense of needing to make it perfect. And, you know, really look for just what's one thing you can do today for one other person in your organization.
Yes, ma'am. And so I want to build on that. What do we say to the people, whether it's leaders or individuals, who just feel as though that the lockdown, COVID, or racial oppression haven't really impacted our mental health? How do we address that? How do we address that divide and encourage more staff to speak up and actually seek the help?
Where do you even begin on that one? Sorry, my eyes. I don't remember you asking a question like that in our practice. And I'm like, wait, who's in denial here? Like, it's like, how? You can't fight the data. The data
right.
shows it. But let me pause. I've taken up a lot of space, and so I want to create room for other folks to get in there.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of data already out there. So, I mean, that exactly, Cornell, what you said, you can't fight the data. So, I mean, even the World Health Organization has said, you know, specifically burnout is now its own pandemic. And in terms of, you know, I always go back to data. So employee surveys, I mean, we've asked questions around people's wellness, their motivation. Do they feel, we ask a question around, do you feel like your manager cares about your well-being? Just to get a sense of, you know, do people feel supported and that they're cared about as a human being? So I think that data can really speak to leaders that are in denial. Sometimes, yeah, there are managers, leaders, people in the organization that are like, you know, let's just get the work done. Don't worry about everything else. But I think that's where that data really speaks to it, where you can show if employees in your organization are struggling, or externally there's data that even Hakimia in the beginning, you know, you shared some stats. So there's definitely the data out there, and I would say use that to fight against deniers.
I think that's such a good point. I think one of the things I think about is, who am I talking to, right? Because every leader requires something different to move them along. And some are very data driven. I've worked at, you know, very technical organizations where they want to see that data. But then also my DEI work is very rooted in critical race theory, which is all about counter story narrative, right? And so how are we telling the stories that, you know, of the people, right? And putting a human behind that data too, to show here's the face of what this has caused over the last year and a half, right? Almost 2 years now. And these are real people, and look at how this has impacted real people. And then for the one that needs to go a step further, and how has that impact on our people impacted the business? What have we lost? What haven't we been able to gain because we haven't set up the mechanisms and the support structures to be able to take care of our people so that they can help us also take care of the business as well. So some people need that domino effect, right? Of like, here's where we began and here's how it impacts and why it should matter to you. But I find that the storytelling, the counter narrative is super critical and really impactful as well.
Yeah. I think in addition to the data and the science, there's also just a human level too, right? And I think that it's a really important reminder that the expectation here isn't that everyone is experiencing the pandemic and everything that's going on in the same way. So we're not asking maybe those folks who are denying that there's been a real impact to feel the same way that others are feeling. That's not the expectation. Everyone is dealing with their own struggles. Maybe that person who is saying, I don't see it, or I'm not feeling it that way. Maybe they are a parent, or maybe a caregiver, or maybe there's someone who lives alone and has been feeling really isolated. And so I think that it's important to remind them that, you know, your employees are not a monolith. No groups are a monolith. And so if you can maybe tap into what has their individual personal experience been, you can help to bring them around to the other side of the conversation and help them to see, okay, you're right, maybe this is having an impact, maybe it's manifesting itself in other ways, and just open their mind a little bit and help them to be more receptive to the conversation.
I like what you just said, Allison, because I'm thinking just from a culture perspective, and I know Cornell and I talked about this pre-call, is sometimes we don't even have time to really think about some of the issues that we're dealing with. That's a privilege to some people because you know why? For some of us, we got to get up, tie our shoes, get out there, work, and come back and do the same damn thing the next day over and over and over, right? So how do you address that? What do you do in those instances when you're noticing that this resource is just going and churning and it's like, okay, I see you moving, but there's still something there that I want to bring or create that awareness for you? Because for some of us, and Cornell and I, we talked about this, it's taboo to have this discussion. For me to even open up on a webinar and tell y'all I had struggles, hey, that was a huge step of courage. For some of us, right? So what do you do in those instances?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Even for me personally, sharing this was, definitely as well. It's scary. It's scary to be vulnerable and to share. But something that we did at my last company that I think other companies have done as well is just create mental health days. So about once a month, we did a mental health day all last year, and we didn't just call it a day off or a day, extra vacation day. We specifically labeled it a mental health day. And even the one day a month, we realized over the summer wasn't enough. So we did a mental health week. And then leading up to it, every week we provided resources. We created an internal wiki page, which had links for physical, mental, and spiritual wellness. So, just the idea that it's kind of, everyone, totally, whatever everyone believes is fine. But for people that were struggling in any of those three areas and how they connect to each other, we wanted to create resources for people to reach out. And I think just by calling it a mental health day or a mental health week, it did destigmatize it a bit, where people felt like it was okay to talk about mental health. Because I agree, for an employee to, that felt nervous to say, I need to take a mental health day, maybe they would feel uncomfortable. But by saying it's all right, the whole company is taking a mental health day, it just made it more comfortable for everyone to have those conversations.
And that's a similar take that Headspace, being a mindfulness company, right? Like we should definitely be on top of it. What we did at the top of the pandemic almost instantly was instituted a 4-day work week. And so instead of, and I think what a lot of companies do, which is very well intentioned, they will say, yeah, you have time, take the time you need. Just, that's yours to decide. But what we know is that women of color, right, trans people, right, like people from marginalized identities aren't going to just go, okay, my company said I can take this time and they're going to do it because of the optics of what that means. Right? Of like, well, what meetings am I missing? What decisions get made while I'm gone? What do my colleagues, my boss think of me when I'm taking this time away? Right? And so you got to deal with the added layer of having to do, 10 times as much to get half as far. Right? And so we're not going to do that when everyone else is still grinding. So we took the decision to go, no, everybody's off. Right? There are no meetings allowed to be had. Right? And you're expected to take time for yourself. Every 10 a.m., so I'm in California, every 10 a.m. block and 3 p.m. block are mindful moments. We have guided meditation at 10 a.m. And then, but you can also choose to just go for a walk, go to the bathroom, right? And do whatever you need to do for those 30 minutes. And so really being intentional about that. But going back to the part around how are we, I think the education is so critical. And I think we have to get information in front of our leaders as often as possible. And that's really where many of us, our jobs are. It's like, what does the data tell us? What are the stories, the human behind that data, and keep giving it to them. Unfortunately, change doesn't happen in a day. And so we have to be tenacious in our effort to change and keep doing it and find new ways to put it in front of them, right? And help them make the connection between how this has long-term impacts on us as a business if we do not get this right now. What money is leaving the door? What is it? The average cost to onboard and recruit an employee is $10,000 to $14,000. If we do not take care of them, that money walks right back out the door, and we're spending it again to onboard and recruit. Right? Many leaders understand that language. They understand that language. And I think it's really, really critical that we keep putting that information in front of them.
to contribute a little bit more to that, the thinking around education and kind of training, I'm seeing all these questions in the chat that's sort of like, what about the managers who just don't know what to do? Someone comes to them with a question or, maybe takes a step into that world of being vulnerable, and the manager is sitting there with their arms crossed or silently on a Zoom, like, what in the, how do I? And I do think that it's so critical to work with managers, talk to managers, normalize that empathy is a critical skill of management. Being able to, as a manager, sit with someone and hear them, understand what they're saying, what they're going through, not have to solve it, not have to, immediately in that moment, tie it back to the job or the business, but to just be a person with another person. We have a manager handbook, and we inside BlueBoard are, pretty big generally on empathy. But even as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, when's the last time I sat with my leaders and got a good understanding of what are the questions you're asking in your one-on-one? How are you drawing your employees out? When did I last, empower them with tools to have some harder conversations and not feel like, oh, goodness gracious, I'm out of my depth, I'm uncomfortable, let me just shut this down or let me ignore it. And so I think as people leaders, that's something that you need to touch on a regular basis. You need to reinforce, you need to talk about it. It can be as simple as, a manager roundtable. How are you connecting with your employees right now? What are the pulse, what's the pulse you're hearing from your team? Let people provide mutual support. How do you deal with these kinds of things? But, look at those managers as these kind of junctures inside the organization that, like, you're not going to be in every room with every employee who's got something going on. And so what can you do to tool your managers to be successful in those conversations and, guide them to really lead with empathy in their roles?
Yeah. And creating that space. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cornell. No, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Creating a space for those moments where you don't have to even ask me for me to feel comfortable to come to you as well. Right? I think, Shannon, something that you just said was that, like, I'm not going to be in every room, and we know that people managers have increasingly more responsibilities. So if you're a people manager in this call, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, like, I want to do that, but I don't know where in the day that happens, right? And so those moments happen in those one-on-ones too, but I may not always have those moments. So I think how are we also creating a culture where even before I get to ask, you can show up and say, hey, I'm struggling.
Right.
I need support. I need help. And here's what support looks like for me. Right. I think that's a part of it.
And that's what, Shannon kind of started us off with, is just start today.
Yes.
And you don't have to start with something big. You don't need a huge budget for these things either, because a lot of folks, right now don't have the resources to be able to roll out these huge programs. But a conversation and just taking 2 minutes at the start of any meeting to ask, how are you doing? That doesn't cost you anything, right? And laying that foundation today. So like Cornell said, you're not just waiting for someone to be in a crisis. You're building that foundation of trust and that safe space today. And then it makes it easier for those conversations to happen when they're most needed.
I think when it does,
go ahead, Kavita. Go ahead, Kavita.
And I think when managers aren't comfortable doing it, it might be because it wasn't role modeled for them. So I think a lot of times the more it can start at the top, where if the leadership or executive team is role modeling that with managers, then they will naturally just trickle that down to their teams as well. But if their leader or someone on the executive team isn't asking them, like, hey, how are you doing? There's a lot of pressure. How's your team? Then it won't feel so automatic and comfortable for them to do the same for their teams.
There were two things that I wanted to, let me jump in real quick that Shannon mentioned, Cornell, all of you, I want to pull it out. So Shannon really talked about creating that space of psychological safety. And I know we didn't go into deep, but I want you to explain what that looks like. And then Cornell, you really talked about, hey, having that discussion when you do create that space, but really connecting and saying, how are you really, like right now in this moment, being real, sitting with that. So please talk a little bit more about that.
Can you want to go first?
Go
No,
ahead,
you can
Shannon.
go first. No, you can jump in, Cornell.
Okay.
You go.
Okay. I think for me, because even how many times have we been asked in our life, how you doing? And we go, well, you don't really want to hear the answer. So I'm good, right? And we lie, right? Because we don't think that the average human actually wants to hear, I'm struggling. Right, I think it was Ellen DeGeneres in 1993 that did a stand-up, about that kind of interaction, right? And it's like we oftentimes are so moving so fast, at least within the U.S. context, we're a move kind of culture, and so we don't often stop to go, hey Allison, hey Shannon, hey Kavita, hey Hakimia, what's going on with you today? How are you today, right? And really sit to listen. And so what we do at Headspace is asking, don't tell me how you doing, how are you really, really doing? Right. And being very direct, like Kavita was saying about how they were intentional about naming it mental health days.
Yeah.
So we're intentional about going, no, don't lie to me. How are you really doing? And it goes, and because that added invitation to really be honest about what you're dealing with goes, oh wow, like you're like really trying to hear about what I'm dealing with. And it's not just at work. What are you dealing with at home? If you care to share.
Right.
Not everybody wants to put their business in that, because that's a whole cultural thing too, right? Mm-hmm. My business is yours. But am I opening the door? And it may take time, right? For any people managers out there, or for people who support people managers, asking that question the first time won't just snap and it changes. But over time, if people, I used to teach high school English, and one of the things they told us when we first started teaching was that the minute you become inconsistent with your behavior and how you manage your classroom is the minute your kids know that you're not serious. Same thing with adults. The minute you stop being consistent with asking the question, how are you really, really, right? The minute you stop, they go, see, you didn't really care. That was a one-time thing. That was because it was a Tuesday, or because the sun was shining, right? It wasn't, an ongoing thing. So we got to keep going. And eventually we start creating that energy where, like, my boss actually cares about how I'm feeling, and I'm going to test this thing out and try it.
Yeah, to add on to that, for me, there's something so valuable about being present, showing that you are there for the conversation, and that it's not, rote. It's not part of your script. It's not like, I'm just asking you this because I'm supposed to ask you this, but like, let's get on to like what's on your to-do list and when you're going to get that thing done.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this conversation is going to take 5 minutes because things actually are going fine. And other times this conversation is going to take your whole one-on-one. And other times it's going to turn your day upside down because somebody is going to say, actually, since we're talking about this, like these things are on my mind, and you're going to find yourself needing to work on those things. But if you show up and you just sort of, as Cornell said, if you just ask the question and then you just keep it moving, you almost didn't ask the question. It like kind of doesn't count, And so be present, take time for those conversations and listen in them, be active, remember what's going on. Your employee says to you, I'm okay. Like I got some stuff going on. I don't really feel like talking about it. Okay. Like note that, that's fine. You can respect that, but maybe next week. Hey, I remember last week you said you had some stuff going on. How's that going? Follow up, be, aware and present in a way that empowers you to continue in an ongoing dialogue with the person, not just ask the question to ask the question.
Yeah. I will also say model the behavior. So it's so important to ask the question of your employees. It's also important for you to answer authentically, vulnerably, and honestly as well. And that also signals to your employees, if my manager is comfortable telling me I'm struggling, I'm going through it, I'm languishing, right? That's okay. And it tells your employees that I can be honest too. And maybe on a human level, she'll be able to relate. So I think that that's also really, really important. Just model the behavior that you want to see in your team.
Yes. So I know.
My Baptist church is coming out, Hakimi. I'm like,
Right. Okay. Amen, Allison. Look, she's bringing it. So what are some of those, tools that managers could use to approach this topic with employees? What's worked for you all?
You stumped us, Hakimia. We've been talking about this so much. I think bringing managers together, I mentioned this before, but getting managers together for mutual support is a good tool. That, you know, puts you as the HR leader in a, you know, kind of position to say, what are you hearing from your teams? How are you handling those things? But you don't necessarily know what's going to come out of that conversation. And so you may find that managers that are more experienced are able to offer some guidance to managers who are less experienced. Managers who, you know, just have a knack for this, or they've got skills, can say, oh, something I tried with my team was this. You know, we see different activities across different teams. So one of our values at BlueBoard is build meaningful relationships. And some teams do that in certain ways, and other teams are like, oh, say what? You got your team together and you did this kind of an activity. How would that look on my team? And, you know, what could I learn from that? And so I think carving out space for managers to spend time with each other to learn, exchange, and share is one tool to, you know, try to open up the conversation among managers and empower them.
I do want to underline that, Shannon, because I think that that's so important, that we've been talking already a lot about what are we asking of our managers, right? But our managers are humans too, right? And they are also dealing with a lot. In the last year, we have a monthly managers roundtable, and you know, we started to realize, like, what is the biggest barrier to you feeling like you are supporting your teams? And they said, it's because I'm struggling myself. And it's really, really hard as a manager to feel like I'm going to be the cheerleader and the motivator when I myself am struggling or have questions or just are feeling really burnt out, right? When their cup is not full themselves, it's really hard. You have nothing else to pour into your team. So I just want to underline what Shannon said. Make sure that you're checking in not just with your employees and individual contributors, but also managers, folks at all levels.
And I want to underline that, Allison, because we haven't put enough, I don't say pressure, but responsibility on senior leadership as well. Because what I know to be, you know, I've been in corporate for 2 years now, and the people manager role reminds me of what it's like to be a student affairs professional. As a student affairs professional, you are in the middle of the organization and the student. You're hired to support the student, right? But you are in the middle of advocating for the needs of the organization and also the needs of the students, which are not always the same.
Right.
I think the same thing as a people manager. How many people managers have we talked to for, like, I know what's right, but that's not the message I'm getting from over here, right? And so how are we really getting senior leaders to recognize and model and say it is okay to do what is right for our people, so that our organization actually can thrive? But sometimes those messages, right, and obviously we're going to listen to senior leadership and listen to the organization, because that's who cuts my check, pays my mortgage, and all other bills, right? And so so our employees end up suffering. So the economy of those two narratives are so important to really begin to bring closer together about how supporting here also helps here. But people managers are in the middle of having to do what the organization needs, but also doing what the employees need as well.
You know, and I see Kathy here. I want to bring this out because I've heard this a lot. Advocating for staff and maintaining focus on corporate goals is often conflicting. That is so true, Kathy. Let's address that topic right there. What are your thoughts there? How do we solve for this? Go ahead, Allison.
I'll jump in. I think, Kathy, that's absolutely a challenge. I think that one of the effective tactics is to try to flip that script, try to reframe that question. I think that naturally a lot of us come at that conversation thinking, how is someone's mental health struggle going to negatively impact performance? Right? If they need time away to care for themselves, that's negatively impacting my goals. On the flip side of that, so reframing that conversation, how can someone who is truly caring for their mental health and living in their best version of themselves, how are they reaching their fullest potential? What value can they then add to the organization? How grateful do they feel to the organization for supporting them in getting the help and taking the time that they need? And so I think maybe reframing that conversation helps to just shift the conversation. I think words matter. right? And the way that we name these resources, the way that we address these issues matters with our words. And so changing that dialogue, changing that script can, I think, at least be an entry point.
Anyone else on that topic? Thank you, Allison. That was well said.
I know it's not a perfect solution, but I think that it's a start.
It is. It definitely is. So what are these steps as we reach the close of our webinar? What are some of the steps to really shift culture in a positive way to normalize this discussion and to have a mindset and create this atmosphere of belonging? What does that look like?
Are we already almost at time? My goodness.
Mhm.
Yes, we've been running our mouth. Yes.
I think one little piece that I would say is look for your strengths. When you're trying to figure out where to begin, it's easy to look at what you don't have. It's easy to say, I don't have a budget, or I don't have a leader who's supporting me, or, I'm all alone in this. I don't have the time to deal with it. But what do you have? Do you have a team that already has great relationships and is comfortable being vulnerable? Do you have a great health insurance plan that nobody knows how to use, that you could just unlock for people? Do you have space where you could hold gatherings, where you could bring people together? I think it's just so beneficial to kind of take an audit, and instead of coming from the deficit perspective of like, oh, this is hard, I don't know where to begin, and I don't even know if we have anything to get started. Look at what you do have and start to build from there so that you can feel confident in the foundation and build upward.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in a similar vein, starting with what you have, I think if you're trying to get leadership buy-in, I would also appeal to what your company values are, right? So I'm fortunate at Carew, I'm part of an organization where health above all else is our number one goal. And it has been since our founding, right? And originally that was really tied to physical health, but obviously more recently in recent years, it's really evolved, I would say even more so, into how are we thinking about the total human? How are we thinking about everyone's holistic health, mental well-being? And so if you have it as part of your values, great. If it's maybe not as explicit as health above all else, I think look at your values and how can you tie this conversation to what you already believe in and stand behind as an organization, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a really great way to get leadership buy-in, because your leadership has already signed off on those company values and what you stand for. And so if you can tie it to saying, well, this is what we believe in, we were already invested in this. Right. This is in alignment, right? Because most people, human nature, you don't want to be out of alignment with something that you've already put out into the world, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is something really important in terms of holding accountability for your leadership and for your organization. The other thing that we've talked about is just like, it's the big things and the small things. So it's the big resources. It's also just those small moments, those conversations that again don't cost anything.
Yes. So I would love to hear from you all. Kavita, starting with you, what is that one thing that you would encourage our family today? That one thing that they could do to start to normalize this discussion around mental health.
I think that, employees will talk to each other, right? So when they share these things with their manager or HR, they're going to share how people reacted. So I would just say, really think about the fact that it's not just a one-on-one conversation with that employee. They're going to talk to their friends. And so if you're supportive, even if you, like Allison and Shannon and others said, even if you don't have all the answers, if you're supportive, then people will feel more comfortable telling their friends like, yeah, my manager didn't know what to do, but I don't feel like I'm off of a, promotion track. I don't feel like I'm now not, included in the team meetings. So as long as you can kind of make people feel comfortable that you could share and nothing negative is going to happen to your performance or career path, they will share that with their friends and colleagues.
You asked for one thing, and I can't think of one thing, but I'm gonna say the one thing that came to mind first is like how we model it, right? I think, there's a systemic issue that we have to address, and that takes time and that's hard, right? But the way in which I interact with individual people, even though I'm not like officially an HR person, right? Like I interact with people on the same level that HR people, HR business partners interact with them with. So I'm hearing those stories. And when they walk away from an interaction with me, do they feel heard? Do they feel validated, respected? And that goes a long way. That even when other bad stuff happens, right? They're like, but Cornell, right?
Yes.
Right. I had such a great experience with him. I felt that, I felt heard, and that matters to me.
Yes.
And so I just, I think oftentimes we're looking for these solutions that are Harvard and Yale research backed and cost millions of dollars. I'm like, it's the basic tenets of respect the people who you're with, right?
Yeah.
In primary school and kindergarten, right? And so it's going back to the basics, as someone said earlier. And just to echo everything that my awesome colleagues have already said, that don't need any more male attention on it. Y'all already said it. And just thank you for your expertise in this area.
My one thing is just going to be what I said at the beginning. Start somewhere, just take a step forward on this. Don't let yourself get held up by a need for perfection or, the pressure or doubt that you might have about doing it in the absolute perfect best way. Just start with something. Your team will appreciate it. You will feel better. And, it's going to sort of snowball and you'll see that start to happen.
Allison?
I feel like everything's already been said. So I want to add this: take care of yourselves too, right? If all of us are taking care of so many other people at work, in your personal lives, in your communities, make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. Make sure you're holding space for yourself to feel the feelings, to take whatever time you need, and whatever self-care looks like for you, make sure that you're doing that for yourself as well.
So many great remarks. This is an amazing session. We need another hour. So that means we brought the heat and the insight. And my one thing to you all is, just because no one else can heal or do your inner work doesn't mean you can or should or need to do it alone. You are more than your struggles. You are more than your challenges or your illness. Now raise your head and use your voice and act like the leaders you already are. Blessings to you all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.